Raise your arms if you like semaphores. Lionel's ubiquitous number 151 on this episode of Toy Train Tips and Tricks. And hello again, this is Mike, and this episode of Toy Train Tips and Tricks began as a gift, a Christmas gift, as a matter of fact. Those of you who have larger collections understand that when friends and relatives try to pick out the perfect gift for you, they just don't know what to do. Because after all, what do you get for the person who has everything? They know you like trains, but they don't know what you have, what you don't have, and what your interests are. But they make the effort anyway, and my wife and one of my sons were going through an antique mall when they came across a 151 Semaphore and thought it was a good deal. Well, I opened the gift and I was very appreciative, but since they were not Lionel people, they didn't notice that it was missing a few parts and was going to need some help to get operational. So I quickly went onto eBay and I found two other 151s listed under junk for parts only, things that needed a little TLC, and my hope was that between the three I could get one working. Well, as it turns out, I had enough parts. I've got two of the three working because these things are rather easy to work on and parts are readily available. And so let's follow along with today's episode on the Lionel 151.
Almost from the beginning of toy train production, designers looked for ways to add interest and action to model railroad displays through the addition of structures, lights, and signals. Early signals and semaphores were, of course, manually operated, but as early as 1915, Lionel and others were producing mechanically operated semaphores with lamps to provide the red and green indications of the semaphore positions. In 1926, Lionel introduced the number 80 semaphore for standard gauge trains and the identical number 080 model for O-gauge trains. These models were identical other than the number, with what is described as an orange base, which tends to look more like red today, and a red signal arm. Best of all, these semaphores were not only lighted, but they operated electrically, so that the motion between the up and down positions was changed by a passing train. Thus, the accessory had lights, motion, and mimicked real-life semaphore action. In 1936, the accessory was renumbered to 80N and was cataloged for use by both standard gauge and O-gauge trains. And that semaphore remained in the catalog through the end of pre-war production in 1942. In 1927, Lionel added the number 82 and 082 semaphores to the standard gauge and O-gauge lines respectively. These signals included the additional function of temporarily stopping a train when the semaphore was activated. A heat-activated switch would cut off track power when the stop indication was activated. And after a short while, the switch would heat up and restore power to the track as the semaphore arm raised to the proceed position. Like the number 80N, the number 82N for both track types was cataloged from 1936 to 1942. After the war, no similar accessory was cataloged by Lionel until 1947, when a brand new design was released, the number 151 automatic semaphore, featuring a die-cast base, metal tapered pole, and plastic semaphore arms and lighting assemblies. These signals were rugged and reliable, and thus remained in production throughout the post-war era all the way to 1969. And even as the 21st century has brought us more scale-oriented items and modern electronics, both Lionel and MTH have made carbon copy models of these rugged signals in the 2000s. On real North American railroads, semaphore signals are seldom seen today, but in the first half of the 20th century, they were an essential part of railroading. Capable of indicating track situations to crews both in daylight with a highly visible arm and at night with multicolored lights, semaphores were essential to the safe operation of trains around the clock on America's main lines and branch lines. Over time, lighted signals proved to be just as effective for indicating track conditions day or night, and lights-only signals were easier to maintain and less expensive to operate, and slowly but surely the one-armed messengers were replaced. In Lionel land, on the other hand, the number 151 semaphore is very reliable, and if something should go wrong with a 70-year-old semaphore, most repairs are simple and parts are readily available from both regular part suppliers and from less than perfect models from shows and internet sites. The part that provides the motion, that thingamabob that does the job, so to speak, is the part number 151-55 solenoid coil. With prolonged use, it is possible to burn out this solenoid coil, but this one is more robust than most of Lionel's accessory solenoids. So that is not usually the problem with inoperative semaphores. If the coil is the problem, I was unable to locate that specific part listed at any of my favorite parts dealers, but I did find a complete assembly on eBay for $10, and you can often find less than perfect semaphores with functioning coils to cannibalize inexpensively. The solenoid coil is attached to a rack and pinion assembly that pulls the semaphore arm down into the stop position when a train is present. When the track is clear, the coil de-energizes and a return spring, part number 151-27, pushes the semaphore arm back up. If the arm is sluggish in returning to the up position or does not fully return, a weak spring is sometimes the problem. To access the spring for adjustment or replacement, simply pull off the finial cap, and there's the spring. Numerous part dealers have replacement springs in stock priced as low as 50 cents each. Also, check the gears on the rack and pinion assembly to make sure there's no gunk or corrosion between the rack and the post. Clean and lubricate as necessary. One last thing to check, if the semaphore arm is not aligning properly, is the fit of the rack and pinion assembly. When the arm is fully upright, its pinion should engage between the second and third teeth on the rack. If it requires adjustment, remove the shoulder screw and reattach the semaphore arm in the correct position. If your light has gone out, the bulb is accessible by loosening the small screw, and I mean small screw, that attaches the cylindrical lamp housing to the post. Then remove the housing to access the bulb. For a replacement, look for a 14-volt automotive lamp with a BA9 or BA9S bayonet base. These can be found by the boxful on eBay or from numerous electrical suppliers. Or if you want to try an LED replacement, again look for a 14-volt BA9 or BA9S base, but look for a bulb with a smaller globe. Many of this type of LED are too large to fit in the semaphore's bulb housing. Probably the most fragile part of the semaphore is the plastic arm, part number 151-11. To replace a broken arm, you will likely also need a part number 151-17 pin. Many dealers have original and replacement arms in stock, but the pins seem to be harder to find. I did find a variety of them on eBay. By the way, the MTH semaphore arm and pin will also work. The vast majority of arms for the number 151 have dome-shaped lenses, but the earliest models, made in 1947, have flat lenses, and these are far more difficult to find. When replacing a broken semaphore arm, try to salvage the pin. I used small-end nippers, pliers, and a small flat screwdriver to slowly work the large end of the pin out of the housing. Be patient. Once the pin is about 1/8 of an inch or so out, you should be able to pull it the rest of the way out with needle nose pliers. When placing the new semaphore arm, check the alignment of the rack and pinion before seating the pin in place. And now your semaphore should work fine, if it's wired properly. Ah yes, the wiring. In order to operate the semaphore, you will need some sort of activation mechanism. Depending on the age of the semaphore, it should have originally included either a number 153C or number 145C contactor. Both are spring-activated switches that are placed under the track. The weight of a passing train brings the contacts together and completes an electrical circuit to engage the solenoid coil. An adjustment nut fine-tunes the sensitivity of the switch so that it activates when the train approaches, but does not remain engaged all the time. Because these contactors are difficult to keep in tune, most hobbyists choose other methods of activation, such as an insulated outside rail or an infrared detector. Whichever method you use, it is important that you wire these posts of the accessory properly. The center post is a shared connection between the light circuit and the coil circuit, and therefore many believe this post connects to the same transformer post as the outside rails, which are typically the ground or common part of the circuit. But that is a common mistake. Get it? A common mistake? Anyway, this post should be wired to the hot side of the circuit instead, ideally that of the constant voltage accessory circuit. Right around 14 volts is the best. A little less if you can get away with it still with good operation. The right post, as you look at the accessory from the front, connects to the ground or common of the accessory transformer, or if you're using common bus wiring, it can connect to the outside rails of the track. The left post connects to the output of whatever activator you're using, the 145C, 153C, infrared, insulated rail, whatever. And the activator, of course, needs to connect to the ground or common connection of your accessory transformer, or again, the outside rails if, and only if, you're using common bus wiring. For wiring diagrams of these methods, see the schematics at the very end of this video. Also, be aware that the more modern Lionel number 6 2151 semaphore, introduced in the 1970s, operates in the opposite manner. The arm raises to green when the train approaches and normally stays down in red. See the link to an early channel video of that model at the end of this video. The main variations of the number 151 are that the earliest versions have a green base instead of black, and also have flat lenses instead of domed. The semaphore arms of the originals have hand-painted V's, while later models use a quick swipe of a yellow from the small paint roller. There are also some subtle differences in the markings underneath the base and the method of attaching the wiring posts, but for the most part, a 151 is a 151. There were no major changes in operational parts over the years, which helps make them relatively expensive and keeps parts readily available. For best results, there are a few considerations for the placement of the number 151 on your layout. First, be sure it's located in a place where trains will not spend long periods activating the signal, such as at a passenger station. Engaging the coil solenoid for long periods of time can cause overheating and eventual burnout. For more realistic operation, the 151 should ideally be used as an intermediate block signal, a signal on a long stretch of track between control points. Since only 2 indications are possible on the 151, a semaphore like this would not have been used in any location where additional indications are required, such as for diverging routes at a junction. Of course, this is Lionel land and it's your railroad, but if you're the least bit concerned with prototype practice, you should keep this in mind. In any case, whether prototypical or not, Lionel's number 151 and other semaphores are a great way to add lights, motion, and more realistic operation to your layout. And they're easy to find and easy to repair. So keep the trains running, and we'll catch you next time with more toy train tips and tricks.